the Democratic nominee for governor in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So we are right now watching as, kind of this back and forth goes on between Texas and California in terms of redrawing these maps across the country. There's other states that have jumped into the fray. We've heard from Republicans in Missouri and Indiana and Florida. We've also heard from Democrats in Maryland and Illinois. There are not that many weapons to counteract the egregious power grab that is happening at the hands of Republicans right now. If you're fortunate enough to win the gubernatorial race in Virginia, that would mean that, as of right now, Virginia would have a trifecta. And so how are you thinking about Virginia's place in the broader national environment in terms of pushing back against what Republicans are seeking to do?
Well, as it relates specifically to the redistricting efforts that, again, as you mentioned, began with Donald Trump calling up Texas and saying, find me some seats, right? Not so different from when he called up the Secretary of State in Georgia a number of years ago and said, find me votes. The difference this time is that the governor of Texas said that he would do it and move forward with that. In Virginia, though, we have a redistricting amendment that was put into our state constitution, and we have a three-step process that would be required to make any changes to how it is that we do our redistricting, a three-step process that requires a vote before the General Assembly elections for a new General Assembly, another vote, and then it goes to the people. But what I will tell you, my focus is in ensuring that in 2026, Virginia has the very real opportunity to flip back a seat that we lost in 22 and to flip a longer held Republican seat in Virginia's first district, and ensuring that in the 2026 elections, because of Democratic engagement, because of independents or even Republicans, Virginians who have determined that what is happening at the federal level is not working for Virginia, for them, for their businesses, for their livelihood, for their kids, for their healthcare, for their education, that those folks are going to get out and vote. And I will say in 2026, we are working to flip those two seats, CD1, CD2 in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so while because of our constitutional amendment, we can't necessarily move forward and join the efforts of other states, we're going to do the hard work to make sure we realize that impact by flipping those seats, by putting forth great candidates and ensuring that advocates and activists and voters across Virginia recognize the importance of flipping those seats in 26.
Well, New York is in a not dissimilar position where they have to do to be able to amend their state constitution, they have to get 2 consecutive votes in 2 consecutive state legislative cycles. Kathy Hochul has publicly committed to beginning that process and getting that first vote happening when they come back into session in this next legislative session. Would you be in favor of getting the process going, because it is a 3-step process in Virginia, so as to get closer to the ultimate end goal?
I mean, I think that the reality is it's a question of whether the votes exist in the General Assembly. And so it would be conversations with members of the General Assembly about what is possible. And at this moment, certainly Virginia wouldn't be able to take any action that would result in inability to do any sort of redistricting. There are many people across Virginia who believe in the redistricting amendment that took many, many years to put in place. And so what I recognize, having been someone who flipped my seat, I was the first Democrat elected to represent Virginia's 7th district since 1968. I flipped my seat 17 points to win it. My predecessor had won by 15 in 2016. I flipped it in 2018. And so the path I know is by ensuring that people know our policies are better and doing the work on the ground to win. And the reality is whether there are the votes or are not the votes at this point in time to move forward with any sort of changes to redistricting, those are longer conversations to be had within the General Assembly. But what I'm committed to doing is something that's within my power, and that's ensuring that in November 2025, this year, when we have our elections, that we don't just flip our governor's seat, but that we flip the lieutenant governor's seat, the attorney general seat, and that we continue to flip seats in the House of Delegates. I mean, importantly, we have a Republican governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general right now. We have 51 out of 100 seats in the House of Delegates and 21 out of 40 seats in the state Senate. Virginia is very much a purple state. And we are looking to ensure that we can flip those statewide seats, be able to protect Virginians as much as possible, put forth legislation that demonstrates that we're the party of actually governing and doing right by our people and being able to push back against the Trump administration. And what I know to be true is that when we win decisively this November 2025, that we will also be able to create clearer pathways towards flipping one, though I've got my eyes on two congressional seats in 2026. And that is a far faster remedy than any of the alternatives that exist, at least given Virginia's state constitution.
Right, I understand that, and I'm very sympathetic to the idea that obviously this is a political environment where we can and should be fighting to flip those seats, in the way that we would always be fighting to flip seats from red to blue. I guess my broader question is, do you view Virginia as playing an important role in counteracting what we are now seeing is kind of a Cold War, a redistricting Cold War, where all Trump has to say is, hey, Missouri, hey, Indiana, hey, Florida, hey, Texas, and hey, any other raft of states, I need to make sure that we can scientifically engineer these maps so that we don't ever lose in the future. Do you view Virginia as playing an important role in being able to counteract that, notwithstanding the significance of being able to, win these elections by making the case to voters with the maps that exist right now? But in the broader scheme of things, if we continue to go down this path where all of these Republicans view their states as kind of laboratories to be able to engineer these maps so that Republicans can entrench a permanent majority, then how do you view Virginia's role in all of that?
I view Virginia as the laboratory of where we prove what can be done through good governance. I view Virginia as the place where, home to more than 320,000 federal employees, where we have seen thousands upon thousands of Virginians lose their job, and many more who opted for the early outs will be having their public service come to an end in September. We're a place where our state revenues, our income taxes are impacted. Small businesses, restaurant owners are impacted because their neighbors, their friends, their community members are losing their jobs because of the Trump administration. Virginia is a place where we know that at least 6 of our rural hospitals will shut down into the future, and hundreds of thousands of Virginians will lose their health care. So Virginia is the place where we demonstrate that when we are focused on governing well, and when we are standing up for the people of our Commonwealth, that is how we set the wheels in motion. Virginia has long been called the bellwether state, and the reason is because we have these off-year elections that come right after the presidential. We are the opportunity on the ground to rebuke certainly what is happening in Richmond with this Republican governor and his administration, but also the impact of this chaos on Virginia and Virginians that's coming out of Washington. In 2025, it's just Virginia and New Jersey that have statewide elections. And across the country, between those two, it's just Virginia that has the opportunity to flip our statewide seats. And so the role that we play is by being the bellwether. The role that we play is by being the bellwether electorally, ensuring that we are creating a path towards, both a narrative, because winning begets winning, both a narrative towards winning in 2026, as well as ensuring we do our work on the ground to add to those numbers. In 2018, we flipped 3 seats in Virginia. 2 of them continue to be democratically held. 1 of them is imminently winnable. And then when we actually are governing, it's about also ensuring that we're using every tool available to us to push back against the Trump administration and demonstrate that, in fact, if he wants to continue to attack democratic institutions, the actual process of voting, and our representation, that Virginia will stand up for our voters every opportunity that we have, and then we will also make our own opportunity. And so that's how I view Virginia, is as the bellwether where we will turn the page towards what will ultimately be a shift in representation and who has control within the House of Representatives after next year's midterms.
So last question on this. On the point of good governance, I mean, Democrats have kind of lived that. They've exemplified that with what they've done with their blue state weapons, which are California and New York and New Jersey and other states like Colorado, where we have independent redistricting commissions, where we have kind of lived by this idea of good governance in hopes that it'll be reciprocated. But at this point, not only is it not being reciprocated, Republicans are running in the opposite direction, and they've got gerrymandered maps that they're gerrymandering even further. I mean, that's the situation with Texas. And so there's this concern that by virtue of continuing to entrench our reliance on good governance solutions, that we're just unilaterally disarming. And so what would your response to that criticism of just kind of saying, okay, well, we're just going to continue to live by these ideals of good governance while the Republicans are doing the complete opposite?
I mean, I would say that I live by the ideals and the reality of the Virginia Constitution. And so recognizing, and I think that it's important that as Texas has moved forward, I think it's important that California is moving forward. I think that it's important that we do fight fire with fire. But I'm also recognizing that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the process that we have to make constitutional amendments, right? So it was just a couple of years ago that we went through a multi-year process to put a redistricting commission process within our state constitution. We have to have an election. There has to be a vote in the General Assembly, then there has to be elections, then there has to be another election, then they vote again, and then it goes to the people. So, even in looking at this, if someone says, okay, Virginia might be a possibility, that's not till 2028 where there would actually be an impact on congressional elections. And I'm unwilling in Virginia to wait for 2028. And so it is the harder route. I'm not denying that, to say we're going to fucking win those seats in the midterms by working hard and doing it. But in Virginia, that's our only option. And frankly, I think Democrats need to fight more and win more and actually ensure that people know what we are for. Because Republicans have to depend on redistricting and stealing votes and taking seats like they did in North Carolina in order to actually be able to win elections. But we know, as we did in 2018, when we grind it out and go to every community and actually listen to people, that's how we win. And so I could sit back and say, yeah, let's go ahead and try and do something that for 2028 makes a difference. That's too far off. And so understanding that both we have a constitutional amendment in our Constitution, recognizing that there may or may not be the votes in the General Assembly to move forward any changes to that, and also recognizing that it wouldn't actually impact until 2028, I could punt to that point in time, but I'm not going to, because Virginia has a responsibility to act now, which is why we're going to win this November, and then to actually act now and ensure that we win seats that, yeah, through gerrymandering, you could make them easier, but that is literally not an option on the table for us. So we're going to gut it out, and we're going to get volunteers, and we're going to ensure that they have the financing to do it, good candidates who are going to spend every single minute of the day to win their seats. And if I sound like that is the clear focus that I have, it's because I decided to win a seat that people told me was unwinnable. I had people laugh at me, and it's just a reality. It's a strong Republican district. It hasn't elected a Democrat since the 60s. The Republican who was the majority leader of the House lost in a primary from the right. And I quit my job, and I spent every waking moment of my life for a year and a half pulling people together, building a coalition, believing that it's possible. And so I refuse to admit that we have to just, punt to 2028 to be able to do that again in Virginia. I am using the tools available to us, which is relentless campaigning, eventually demonstrating that we are good at governing. And I would call on all of my colleagues, or my former colleagues in Congress and Democrats across the country, that, where it might be right to do redistricting, meeting fire with fire, do it. And where it is not possible, do not just look to California or New York or other states to do it. Do the work on the ground to win, to show people who we are, why we are better than this chaos coming out of Washington. And I obviously feel that rather deeply, because I want Democrats to want to win more. And we can do it if every single day we put a relentless focus, not on, this or that, or but like actually on the needs of people. And that's what we're going to do here in Virginia. It's why we're going to win in November. It's why we're going to win seats in November of 2026, because for us, there is no other option. And, I'm excited about this election. We're going to win. We're going to flip our 3 statewide seats. We're going to send a message to the rest of the country. We're going to put Republicans in the House of Representatives on notice, because we are going to create the beginnings of a wave that will occur and go through 2028. And well, 2026 first, and then on to 2028. And so anybody who wants to follow what we're doing in Virginia, it's abigailspanberger.com to join us, to volunteer, to donate. And we're planning on being that bellwether and pushing us in the right direction.
As it relates to Virginia specifically, we watch these DOGE cuts, for example, kind of wreak havoc on a lot of federal employees, many of whom live in your state. And so how are you thinking about that in terms of this election right now, and especially with regard to your Republican opponent?
I mean, everywhere I go across Virginia, certainly the density of federal employment in Northern Virginia or in Hampton Roads, coastal Virginia, like makes it so any community I go to in Northern Virginia or Hampton Roads, like I don't have to bring it up. Everywhere I go, small business owners are mentioning that they've seen a decline in people coming to their restaurants or to their small family owned appliance shop or to their gift shop. I'm hearing directly from federal employees that they've lost their jobs. I had one gentleman come up to me at an event and he said, I am getting fired tomorrow because of DOGE. And while I'm devastated about the loss of my job, what you need to know is, this is the agency I work for. This is the work that I do. I am worried about what happens when the job that I do, this individual worked in the national security space, is no longer getting done. And so people understand this very, very clearly on the ground in Virginia. And it speaks to the chaos that comes out of Washington. It speaks to one more place where people just don't actually understand to some degree what it is that public servants do, whether they work at NOAA or they work at the VA, a nurse at the VA, an attorney at IRS. Like the list goes on where people recognize, at least in Virginia, the value of these jobs and the notion of public service that comes when a nurse decides to serve at the VA rather than in a local hospital, or when an attorney decides not to go into private practice but to serve at a federal agency, when national security professionals devote themselves to trying to protect the American people and our allies. And so the reality is it's brought so many more people to the political process. We're seeing it all across Virginia, where it's one more example of chaos, but it just so happens to be one more example of chaos that is really, really impacting Virginia's economy.
How are you thinking about Donald Trump wielding the different law enforcement agencies of the government now to go after overtly his political opponents?
Well, I'm going to answer this question certainly as a candidate for governor, but also as a former federal agent. I work narcotics and money laundering cases, and as a former undercover CIA case officer, where I worked, the gamut of things, counterterrorism, and other issues among them. And the idea that we would have a president politicize and attempt to leverage the national security infrastructure of our country, whether it is the basic employment and leadership within our intelligence agencies, or whether it's somebody getting fired because they put forth an intelligence report that the president doesn't like. It is actually just objectively dangerous in the long term, both for the United States and for our partners and allies. But it also undermines really what has been built up as a strength over decades and decades, which is not just U.S. global leadership, but our ability to keep the American people safe, to be ahead of and understand threats. And then at the local level and the community level, the idea that the president of the United States would attempt to use the military and the National Guard in a way that it makes them political, puts them in the middle of his efforts to poke at certain local leaders or make some sort of point. And isn't necessarily focused on making communities safer or understanding the real threats that exist, like what Kash Patel is doing at FBI. And I say this as someone who When I was a member of Congress, I represented Quantico, the training facility for FBI agents, and certainly I represented many FBI agents. Virginia's home to many. The idea that Kash Patel is trying to basically upend the entire mission of the FBI, it makes us all less safe. There are different types of law enforcement, state, local, federal. There are different priorities and criminal codes that those federal agencies follow, and the types of crimes that they investigate, and that is all for a reason. And so the idea that he's going to pivot FBI agents away from counterterrorism and bank robberies and international kidnappings,
Yeah.
to have them work on immigration enforcement, like, that other work needs to be done. And now,
I mean, we've even seen instances where we have these folks that are wearing reflective vests and cleaning up trash in Washington, D.C.
It is not making us safe. And the fact of the matter is, the people who devote their lives to law enforcement, whether it's at the local level, the state level, the federal level, or people who devote themselves to service to country in the National Guard, right? They do it because they want to serve a purpose and a mission. And the idea that Donald Trump is taking those individuals or those roles and politicizing them is deeply, deeply damaging to those different agencies, the different scope of work that they need to do. And frankly, the long-term strength of the types of investigations that occurred in, historically per U.S. code with different law enforcement agencies. And so it's deeply concerning. And I think there will be a long-term effort once we have a new administration come January 2029, where we will have to do a lot of rebuilding of just the kind of basic tenets of what those agencies are supposed to be doing, and ensuring that they're meeting the mission in a very real way.
Finally, one last time for folks who are looking to support your campaign, where can they go?
AbigailSpanberger.com is my website. You can sign up to volunteer. If you're in Virginia, that's fantastic. If you're from afar, we welcome you to travel to our beautiful Commonwealth, where you can volunteer virtually. We are always in need of wonderful support. So anybody who wants to contribute financially, we are up in many different media markets, and the Washington, D.C. media market's pretty expensive. And we just made another order for 50,000 more yard signs. Those things are expensive, and people love them across Virginia. We want them to be in every neighborhood, in every corner possible. So support is always wonderful, always appreciated. And I'm just grateful for anyone who wants to get behind us as we are flipping this seat this November. Early voting starts in Virginia September 19th. So we will have early indicators of the level of energy and excitement here on the ground.
Excellent. Well, we'll be following along closely. Thank you for all the time today, and best of luck in the campaign trail.
Thank you so much.